Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Licensing Subcommittee hearing. Could I ask everyone to note the fire safety instruction that on hearing the alarm you should leave the chamber via the double doors at the back, exit the building through the main entrance and congregate in the car park. Also, please switch off all mobile phones and turn any other electronic devices being used to silent. This meeting is subject to an internet webcast recording where the proceedings are capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the public area of the council chamber, it is likely that your image will be captured by the recording cameras and result in your image being part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should leave the public seating area of the council chamber and move to the upper public gallery. Councillors Murphy, Davies and Gorton are forming the subcommittee, and members have nominated Councillor Murphy to chair the hearing. Councillor Murphy, please continue. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I would advise members and others here present for this meeting that in dealing with the business of the subcommittee, members will be exercising an administrative function with a process similar to that of the Magistrates' Court. However, the proceedings will be informal and the rules of natural justice will apply. For the benefit of those present, I will outline the procedure to be followed in dealing with this agenda. Councillor Murphy, Councillor Davies and Councillor Gorton are forming the subcommittee today, or rather this afternoon. Councillor Murphy has been nominated to be the chair of this meeting, and the chair will ask all parties to introduce themselves. The licensing officer will then introduce the report in relation to this hearing. Members may ask questions on the report and others may also ask questions. The chair will then invite any other persons present who have made a representation and would like to speak. Members may ask questions and other parties may also ask questions. The chair will then invite the licensee or their representative to address the subcommittee. Members may ask questions of the licensee and other parties may also do the same. There will then be an opportunity for the licensing manager and the licensee to make closing statements. Members will then leave the meeting to consider their decision and may request legal advice during that discussion. When members rejoin the meeting, they will give their decision together with their reasons orally. The decision itself will be confirmed in writing within 5 working days following the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Before I ask the licensing manager to introduce the matter before us today, could I ask all persons to introduce themselves, starting with the licensing officers?
Good afternoon, Chair, members, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Leonard. I'm the licensing officer, acting as the manager today.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, councillors. My name is Freddie Humphreys and I'm a barrister instructed to speak on behalf of the applicant this afternoon.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Dominic Lockerbie. I'm the operations manager for the Co-op store in Hutton.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, of course. Right, you must introduce yourself.
Just wanted to know. Do you want me to do declarations of interest at the same time?
Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Councillor Keith Barber. I'm one of the 3 borough councillors for the ward in question. And I would also declare that I'm a resident of the local area, have used the shop for over 60 years, and I'm also a committee member of the local residents association. However, the views I put forward today are in my role as a councillor, and the residents association has not discussed or taken a position on the application by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, and to my right is
Councillor Vicky Davies. Good afternoon.
You've already heard and I'm chairing today. So we're going ahead. Application to vary the premises licence of the cooperative at 62 Woodlands Avenue, Hutton. Mr Leonard, would you please introduce the matter?
Indeed, thank you, Chair. As said, this is a report to determine an application received from Shoesmiths LLP on behalf of the Co-op to vary the licence at the cooperative 62 to 64 Woodland Avenue, Hutton, CM131HH. No representations were received from the consulting responsible authorities. 3 local residents and a ward councillor have made representation to the proposed changes, and a further 2 representations of a similar nature were received but did not qualify under the consultation guidelines and were therefore disregarded as invalid. The representations all relate to historical events of recorded crime and disorder and have occurred at the location previously, and all raise public nuisance concerns and a perceived inability of the staff to safely address the antisocial element that the proposed extended hours are likely to attract. In regards to this, obviously the committee's got 3 options to consider on this: to grant the application in full on the terms and conditions contained in the operating schedule, along with any applicable mandatory conditions; to grant the application modified to such extent as considered appropriate in order to satisfy any relevant representations and to promote the licensing objectives; or to refuse the application in whole or in part. I won't teach you to suck eggs regarding the background and support information because I think you're aware of the objection though, so I'll go straight to the application, which was received on the 27th of May 2026. To vary the licence, a copy of this application together with the supporting layout plans is attached to Appendix 1. The premise operates as a supermarket and post office serving the local housing estate. It is situated in a small parade of shops in an otherwise residential location. And a copy of the current premises licence together with a set of OS maps and images to better identify the location is attached to Appendix 2. Just as another point to add on that, since the application received on the 27th of May, there was an application received and processed to vary the DPS, the designated premise supervisor, at the premises. So as you will see on the updated premises licence, which is attached at Appendix 2, that was issued on the 13th of July to the current licensee. The application proposes to amend the licensable hours and opening hours to 6 AM to 2300 hours, removing Good Friday and Christmas Day restrictions, to update the plan attached to the premises licence, and to remove the condition contained in Annex 2, alcohol shall not be sold in an open container or be consumed in the licensed premises. I think just as a footnote to explain to everybody on that thing, I don't think those making a representation initially or in question this really understood that this is basic, as I think the councillor said, the premises have been there for a number of years. It was operating really in effect to the terms and conditions granted for a justice's licence under the 1964 Act. This application is clearly trying to bring it up to the 21st century. And the alcohol not being sold in an open container is just merely old embedded conditions, just to allay any concerns that people were thinking this is going to become a pub. It was never going to be the case. In addressing the full promotion of 4 objectives, Part O, which is on the application Appendix 1, the applicant proposes a schedule of undertakings that will be attached as conditions at Annex 2 should a variation to the licence be granted. As I said, no representations were received from any of the responsible authorities, and the representations received from the 3 residents all live locally to the premises, and as does the ward councillor. All parties refer to historical events that have occurred at the location previously, and all raised public nuisance and antisocial behaviour concerns arising from the proposed extended hours and a perceived relaxation in operating standards. Despite proposing a significantly improved operating schedule to address the promotion of the 4 objectives and not apparent on the current licence, there appears to be concerns that the staffing and security does not adequately befit the location, that does not always attract the right customers, particularly later in the evenings. Redacted copies of all valid representations are attached to Appendix 3. Again, I'll refer to Statement of Licensing Policy. There's a number of recommendations that come from our policy which you may want to take in consideration in regards to that, and again with the relevant sections from the Secretary of State, which again I think was pointed out in the last time, they might all go against the applicant, but I think these are just balanced paragraphs that one would consider that the applicant needs to address to satisfy you with regards to the application. That is basically the application, Chair, and so I can help anyway with any questions and answers, because I think it's been made a lot more complicated than it actually is.
Thank you, Mr Leonard. Do you have any questions?
Not
of
at
the
this time, thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. To Mr. Leonard, can you explain a bit more about this removing of the condition contained in Annex 2, alcohol shall not be sold in an open container or be consumed in the licensing premises? On the face of it, this appears common sense, but you said it was something that is now obsolete. Could you elaborate, please?
That's it.
Thank you. Yes, I think as explained on this, possibly the better way of applying would have been to say to remove all embedded conditions, as they were all. If you look at the previous licence, which was originally on there before we put this one in, unfortunately, it was all embedded conditions from the 1964 Licensing Act, and therefore that was the way the wording went to prevent an off licence becoming an on licence. And I think it's been misinterpreted by some making the query, thinking, crikey, if that condition goes, does it then become an on-licence pub? And that was never the case. Again, some of the issues that came up with regards to this is that I think people again were asking that, you know, they want to go later to 11 o'clock at night. The current licence was already to 11 o'clock at night, and I think the point that maybe the point is that when I visited the scene to check the notices and make sure everything was okay, it would appear the premises elects to shut at 10 o'clock. Now that might be because of staffing issues or even geographical issues, but that's the prerogative of the applicant, the licence holder, as opposed to anyone object. So the additional hours were not going later to 11 o'clock; they were already there. The request for the earlier hours is because the premises is an all-purpose news agent and everything that goes with it. It opens earlier to provide newspapers, does newspaper rounds and whatever. And the one issue that does come to light if the licence isn't granted like that is at the current stage is that the premises does not seal off or cover alcohol for sale between 6:30 when it opens and 8 o'clock, which the current licence allows. So we've got that situation where technically they're breaching the conditions of the licence. However, they have got till permits when I go through that, so they won't be serving. But again, in the technicality of all this is exactly why the application has gone in, is to bring the thing up to date so that we can work on it. As I said, as an enforcement officer, I want to see things proportionate and fair, but I also need to see conditions that I can actually enforce if I need to. You know, we can regulate and work through it all. Certainly the experience on the visit there and the staffing there is, as much as we've had lots of resident, you know, McCall's and Morrison's and all these sort of places that are all being updated in the last 10 years under the Act, it is actually just bringing them up to the conditions of the new licence. And I think the understanding on here was potentially the location where we are at here. This is the 7th of 7 co-op premises in this borough. So it's the last of the 7 to be varied with a view of upgrading to the new conditions and to make it more appropriate. And in that respect, I think the only other thing that looks on that is from the visits and when I've gone there is that potentially it is a meeting place for those at night because of the shopping parade. There's nothing else around there. But again, no representations made from the police on crime and disorder, no complaints from the Environment and Health with regards to noise nuisance or antisocial behaviour. So with regards to this application, predominantly it's to allow the hours to open when the shop opens at 6:30 in the morning. So that's the additional extension of hours. It's not later at night, it's the hour and a half before their current licence kicks in. And then the condition to remove that antiquated condition is to apply a whole load of new conditions. As we've said on this, the old licence didn't have anything to do with CCTV, it didn't have anything to do with Challenge 25, it didn't have anything to do with dispersal policy or staffing training. The new application has all of these. So again, fully understand why the application was submitted. I hope that explains everything.
One thing, Councillor to my right, she would like to ask you an additional question.
Apologies, because I'm probably getting myself confused. I hear what you're saying and understand that it's historic. Changes are required because of the nature of the historical conditions that have been in place since 64. But it does say in here, open from 0600. And you're saying to me that they're not actually going to be selling alcohol at that time, but legally they could. I know it sounds ridiculous. I'm sure people won't want a bacon sandwich and a vodka, you know, but it's a legality. Would they be at liberty to do that?
Absolutely. That is the key to this thing. Is that under the current licence, where their licence starts at 8 a.m, the shop opens at 6:30 or 6 o'clock, whichever they choose to do on that. However, theoretically, well, not theoretically, they should, by the law, they should be blocking off the aisle and covering with blinds or lockable shutters or something that stops any display of alcohol being apparent to anyone that comes in at 6 o'clock or 6:30 in the morning. What the new act, it was 2005 it came in, brought in, was the fact that if you treat the sale of alcohol as a responsible product to be sold responsibly like any other product in the shop, then whatever hours you're looking at, and that's where this 24-hour licensing came in, was actually whatever your shop works or whatever your unit works to, it makes absolute sense that you don't have to lock somewhere off for a couple of hours. It's that as long as the staffing training is up to date and everybody is aware of what they're supposed to do or they're required on their role, it shouldn't really matter whether 6 o'clock. Again, I think the original fear when this all came out was, oh, you're going to have alcoholics and all sorts of people waiting at 6 o'clock to be served, you know, like outside of Wetherspoons or something. It's not the case at all. It's just a case of they're bringing it in line with the opening hours of the shop. It would be interesting to hear from the applicant at the end whether there is going to be any change from this 10 o'clock shut that they elect to do at the moment, which is, just as I said, purely voluntary for their own means, as to whether they're going to increase that, which again may then tie in with the representations that have been received where there is a concern later in the evening.
Thank you, Chair. Can I preface all my comments, first of all, by saying that the cooperative retail unit at Woodland Avenue is much valued by myself, other local residents and the community in general. I have no intention to object to the licence being renewed in principle, but today is an opportunity to make representations to bring the licence up to date. This is not something that we do very often. Yes, I'm sure there'll be reference made to some of the history of how long ago some of the events that we have quoted were, but this is the first opportunity where we've actually had a chance to feedback concern around some of those events over recent years to better uphold the licensing objectives of this council. The area in question, first of all, is an area which is highly residential. At night, if you go there, you will find it's quite dimly lit. There is no council-owned CCTV on the shopping parade. And there is a history of antisocial behaviour. Even last week on the Friday, the end of the shopping parade was daubed in graffiti. So there's definitely an incident, and there's incidents of violent disorder in the area at the shop late at night, particularly just before closing time. So I'm not making any representation about the fact that you wish to align the sale of alcohol to the opening hours of the store. I can understand the reasons for that, and I think the probability of that being a problem in the morning is very low, truthfully. What I am slightly concerned about, and I did make a representation and ask whether it could be taken on board by the applicant rather than requiring a formal meeting, was whether some of the assurances which were given in the application could be agreed as conditions, which therefore are enforceable in a legal sense by the council, should that be appropriate. It's all very well and good being told that certain things are the custom and practice of an organisation, But if it's not enforceable, and for example, someone feels unwell late at night, if those minimum staffing levels fall below what the assurance given by the applicant are, then I would expect the shop to close if they weren't able to meet those minimum staffing levels, which is why I'm asking for the items on page 2 and 3 of my representation to be considered by the committee as legally enforceable conditions to an approved licence. So I am suggesting you approve the licence, but with these conditions. I think that this not only protects the customers who use the store, it protects the residents who live in proximity to the store, and also it protects the staff who work within the store. I don't believe there's anything there which is unreasonable or preventative of doing proper business, and I know the cooperative movement takes great pride in the fact that it is a responsible retailer. And I would ask that the applicant gives serious consideration to accepting some of the items which are raised. I would also say that we all know from personal experience that that registers of incidents are difficult to maintain. If someone shoplifts and walks out, you can't really ask them for their name and address to refuse them in future. Maintaining the log, if you've got one person on the till and one person out back, is very difficult. Handling groups of unruly youths late at night on your own is a challenge. And I would ask that the committee gives serious consideration to what's being suggested in my representation as enforceable conditions to be applied to an approved licence. I think that's all I need to say. Otherwise, I'll be happy for it to be renewed, but please strengthen it to uphold the licensing objectives of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. Do members have any questions for?
No, I'd rather hear the applicants.
No, okay, that's fine. We'll move on then. So we'll now hear from the applicant's representative, the Central England Cooperative Council.
Yes, thank you very much. Pardon me. Thank you very much, councillors. I'll do the talking on behalf of the applicant, but if you've got any questions, the two of us will field those together. Perhaps if I just start just to sort of comment on the questions that were kindly answered by your licensing officer, just to confirm in essence what he said. The question from yourself, Councillor Gorton, about that condition that was previously on under the old legislation. Part of the reason why such a condition isn't necessary now is because you would need a licence anyway for on-site sales for consumption on the site. So the Act already itself prevents you from doing that. So you don't need that specific condition. You would need a separate licence, which we're not applying for. We're applying for an off-site sales licence. So that's already dealt with by the legislation. And then in terms of what it is we're applying for, it is, as you've heard, what we would call a regularisation application. So the current licensing hours are 8 in the morning till 11 at night, Monday to Saturday, 10 till 10:30 on a Sunday, restrictions on Good Friday and Christmas Day. But what there's currently not on the licence is any sort of restriction on the opening hours. So as matters stand, there's no control under the licence as to when the store can actually open as a shop. But what we're seeking to do is have consistency between opening hours and licensing hours, and Monday to Saturday, no change in the evening, 11 o'clock, consistency there with our current one, but change in the morning as we've discussed. Similarly, Sunday, there's a slight extension in the evening till 10:30, but again in the morning, it'll be consistent with the other hours, and then Good Friday and Christmas Day, removing the restrictions that are there. So the actual change in terms of the licensing hours that we're seeking is relatively limited, and as we've heard gratefully from the councillor, he's not opposed to that. It's how that is all managed by way of appropriate conditions. So what I propose to do today is take you through what it is we're proposing, how we operate, and by doing so, hopefully that gives you the assurance that you need that this is an application and an applicant who will properly promote the licensing objectives. So the way the application comes about is that there's been a merger between Central Co-op, which is the main co-op that you would understand to be co-op, and Chelmsford Star Co-op. So as a result of that, 29 extra co-ops have become within the umbrella of Central Co-op. And as part of that, Central Co-op wants to ensure that all of the licences are modern licences that accord with the relevant legislation that's now in place, are up to date and do what they need to do, And as you've heard, there's already been a number of those that have been considered by this council and granted by this council, and this is the last outstanding one of those licences. To give you some more context, Dominic, who's the operations manager for the area, he runs, or he has oversight of 13 stores, all of which operate with similar hours to what we're seeking here, and operate with the same policies and procedures that the Central Co-op now has in place. And so he has that experience of running exactly a store of this nature, and indeed as does Central Co-op as a whole. And just if it gives you some reassurance, Central Co-op as an organisation have never been subject to a licence review. So that gives you quite a lot of reassurance about how good of an operator they actually are and how seriously they take the running of their premises. And so, as I say, the store was acquired as part of this merger which took place in September 2025, and the application is to consolidate it into a modern application. To give you an understanding of the scale of the store, it has 17 members of staff. There's a store manager, 2 shift leaders, 2 step-up supervisors. So they're individuals who can run a shift, but that's not their day-to-day job, but they have the training to do so. And then general assistants. We do have a policy which is 2 members of staff is the minimum number of staff that operate. We wouldn't propose to put a condition onto that effect for the simple reason that it can potentially become quite unwieldy, because as soon as somebody, for example, if they have to just nip off for half an hour or something, we'd then immediately technically be in breach of our licence if we didn't have them on the store, and that sort of thing causes a problem. So we reassure you that that isn't our internal policy, but for practical reasons we wouldn't seek to have that as a condition on the licence. All members of staff are subject of extensive training from Central Co-op, who have very robust training packages in place. So they have Let's Learn training, which includes how to deal with age-restricted sales, the implementation of Challenge 25, how to deal with a refusal, that sort of training, and that's undertaken twice a year to ensure that any legislative changes, policy changes, etc. are fully caught by the training that members of staff receive. Additionally, staff members receive avoiding aggression training, so that's how to deal with shoplifters, that kind of thing, so they know how to manage those situations that can arise commonly in the running of a store. Members of staff have body cameras available to them, so we have 2 in store. So one is for whoever it is who's running the shift, and then another will be worn by somebody who's at the till, so they can keep track of, should the need arise to, any incidents that happen in store. We have 20 cameras installed by way of CCTV. So as you've heard, there's not actually any requirement on the licence currently for that, but we've proposed a CCTV requirement pursuant to the operating schedule, but that is already in place and up and running. That is a CCTV that produces images of an evidential quality, so that it can be used by anybody should it need to. It incorporates AI analytics, so the software that sits behind it when the images are used can be properly analysed to understood what's going on. The Co-op also has what's called Watch Me Now, which you may have heard about. It's a system whereby a button can be pressed and an external operating room can gain access to the CCTV footage and then provide any external advice that's required to manage any situations that are going on in store. So in store rather. So I'm sure, as you appreciate, that's not a run-of-the-mill technology that's available to many operators, but it is something that the Co-op has and something that they use. So there are a number of portable triggers for that and fixed point triggers in the store which activate that system if necessary. And so hopefully just the fact that we operate something like that gives you a reassurance of how seriously the Co-op takes the running of its stores. There are headsets in the store, so members of staff can communicate with each other whilst they're in there. So the colleagues who are at work will have one of those. We have 6 headsets available so that members of staff can communicate with each other. Obviously, most of the time that's used for, we're out of pasta on, row 3, can you go top that up? But also it can obviously be used should any more serious incidents arise in the store. The age-restricted sales system is a very strict one and has been devised by Central Co-op. And so when items are scanned at the till. If they're an age-restricted product, automatically there is a notification generated on the till, which will require Challenge 25 to be used. So then the individual who's operating the till will have to confirm whether or not that person is obviously over the age of 25 or whether or not they need to be ID'd. Records of this transaction are kept electronically by the till, so there's no requirement for an individual to do that. It's automatically done by the operating system that we used. And every 4 weeks, a report is generated, which is provided to the DPS of the store so that they can check that the system has been used properly by members of staff. And if they identify any issues in there, obviously that allows them to undertake any refresher training or whatever is needed. But the point is, it's an automated system, so very robust and doesn't allow, or so far as possible, removes a margin for error in terms of how it's operated. Yeah, and then those forms can obviously be passed up the ladder to Dominic and other operations managers should there then need to be a review oversight. There's tiers of management within the business who can therefore check, because we have the electronic records, that everything is being done as should be done. Now, the type of incidents that have been referred to in the store, I think, as has been fairly pointed out, the ones that seem to have caused the most concerns are some that happened back in 2017 and 2018. So I can't really get into those because you appreciate over 8 years ago now. But as a general observation, the concerns that have been raised are basically the shop being victims of theft. And unfortunately, that is something that just happens in stores like this. We don't see how that is changed by this application, because we're not proposing any variation to our opening hours. We're not proposing, other than the technical point I've made obviously already, that there's not actually any restriction at the moment on our opening hours. And so we're not increasing the risk, as we see it, of that type of incident occurring, because the stock that we have in the store is the stock that we have in the store. And the important thing is that we have policies in place, proper training in place, that allows those incidents to be managed if and when they do occur. Because the sad fact of life that there will be incidents of shoplifting. That is going to happen. And what's important is that our staff are properly trained to deal with that. And we're confident that they have. And when there has been an incident, that our training has worked effectively and our policies have worked effectively. And we're comfortable with that. And I think fairly in the context of this application, I'm not diminishing the seriousness of that, but it's not something that's actually changed by this application. And concerns been raised about noise and disturbance from things like delivery times and the potential for that to increase. We're not proposing changing when our deliveries take place to the store, so there's not an increased risk of those happening in the evening. And I think, as pointed out by the office quite fairly, there's potentially been a bit of misunderstanding about what it is that we're actually applying for, which is just simply a regulation, not something that different. And so, councillors, I hope from that you get a sense of how serious we are as an operator and the tools and systems that are available to us. We're content that the operating schedule put forward now properly captures all of those. So a number of the conditions that have been proposed by the councillor are already swept up in the operating schedule that we're proposed, and the way the system works, I'm sure the licence officer will be happy to confirm this, is that operating schedule in essence becomes the conditions that the licence is subject to. That's just how the licensing regime works. We've already captured, for the most part, those things that are proposed. We wouldn't accept the suggestion in relation to restriction on single can sales or high strength alcohol, simply because there's no evidence that supports such a restriction. If you wanted to bring forward a blanket policy of that nature, you'd have to have some sort of evidential basis for doing so. As you've already heard, the licensing regime is a permissive one, and unless there is an evidence base that justifies taking an action of that nature, you shouldn't impose restrictions of that nature, and that's the position we're in here. And so ultimately where all of this gets us to is national policy, and indeed the council's own local policy, commends consistency between operating hours and licensing hours. We're applying for 2300, which is what we've, for the most part, got already as the terminal hour. We've discussed that change at the beginning of the day. The intention is that as things stand, we won't actually change our opening hours, which would be slightly shorter than that, and it is likely that we'll continue to close at 10 o'clock. but we want consistency with the hours that we've already got, and it gives us that flexibility should a business need arise in the future to change that. And quite fairly, I think it's appropriate to say that there is no objections from environmental health, there is no objections from the police. We as a store haven't had any direct complaints from neighbours about noise or anything of that nature, and so there isn't the evidence base before this committee to do anything other than grant the licence in accordance with the terms that is asked for. And I'd just like to say I am quite grateful for the way, even those who've not attended today but made representation, is that there is actually a recognition that the proposed measures and the updating of the licence is in principle a good thing, and there is support for that, and it's nice to see that, because often, as somebody who sits in these sort of situations quite often, you don't get that from individuals, and so I'm grateful that that has been recognised here.
Thank you.
Councillors, I'm content to answer any questions you've got, and obviously Dominic is here as well to answer any questions you have, but hopefully that gives you an overview of the application, what it is we're applying for, and why we'll be a successful operator under the new licence.
Lovely, thank you. I've just one question to ask you. You have 17 staff in total. How many are actually on shift or together working a shift, so to speak? So is the manager locked in the office and there's 2 floaters, or how does it work?
So, good afternoon. That will all depend on what's occurring in the store at that particular time. So there's generally more staff in the store when it has a delivery, so the delivery can be worked quicker. We're not a business that has office-based managers. It's very much encouraged that managers lead from the front and out on the shop floor. Due to the merger that's happened, moving away from Chelmsford Star, that everything's become a lot more streamlined with the more modern technology, so the managers are on the shop floor even more so now than they ever were before. But as I think has already been said, we never have less than 2 people in a store.
Okay.
That is the minimum, and it would go up to 4 at certain points, depending on whether or not it's a delivery day.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor, something?
Thank you for that very comprehensive presentation, very useful. I realise the challenges of getting staff, obviously, you know. Can you assure me that you will always have somebody who is of an age that legally can take responsibility for selling the alcohol, and there's not going to be underage youngsters actually having to take that role?
So we don't have any rules in place that we don't discriminate against an age. The minimum age we take on is 16, but we do have a robust policy in place that they can't serve alcohol without having the manager go and physically authorise it. So in other words, that they would have to use the headset to contact whoever, the manager or the shift leader or whoever's running the shift, and then they have to go and be that responsible person. Yeah, and that's all covered in the training as well.
Thank you, Chair. Still on the staffing side of things, you said something which intrigued me. You said you have a minimum of 2 staff at all times, apart from when someone might have to nip off for half an hour.
Sorry, that was just me. Sorry, Councillor. That was just me trying to give an illustration of the concern about having a condition on the licence mandated at all points in time, and you have to have 2 hours in staff. I was just trying to think of a hypothetical situation in which, for whatever reason, somebody has to leave the store, something might happen, I don't know, there's they have to go run an errand or whatever it might be. Just as soon as that were to happen, we'd technically be in breach of the licence if we stayed open. And so my concern was about the strictness of a condition to that effect. Wasn't trying to make the point that that's something that happens on a regular basis. So apologies if I've created any confusion there. It was just a way of trying to illustrate the concerns about a condition to that effect.
So, if I've got that right, you're talking about, say, a domestic emergency where the member of staff is called away because someone's fallen sick at home. You're not talking about meal breaks or any regular occurrences.
Operation of the store in that regard.
So if for any reason that was the case, that someone fell ill, then we would never trade a store with just one singular person in it. That doesn't happen. So that would be a case that if something untoward like that did happen and it was an emergency, then we would have to draft somebody in from a local store to maintain the maintain the opening of the store. We wouldn't allow someone to work in a shop on their own with nobody else in the building whatsoever.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions, please. The CCTV at the moment, you talked about how many cameras are inside the store. Is it the case that there is only one camera on the front entrance of the store, and that is angled in one particular direction? So if there was disorder or antisocial behaviour outside of the store late at night, it would not be recorded. That's my first question.
Dominic can explain the location of the various CCTV cameras that we've got.
Yeah, we do have one camera at the front of the store, as you've said, and it unfortunately doesn't move. It's a fixed camera. I didn't quite catch the second part of your question. I do apologise.
It was simply that if you had disorder occur a few feet away from the entrance to your premises, that there would be no record of that taking place. There would be, even though if it was a consequence of customers who had just left your store, you would be unaware of it and there would be no video recording of it.
Yeah, well, the CCTV camera covers the area that it covers, and it doesn't cover the areas that it doesn't cover. Obviously, it's in front of the store and covers the area immediately in front of the store, and it obviously doesn't cover anything. It covers. There is one camera, as in there's.
Yeah.
No, that is correct. That's the nature of the camera in that location.
Sorry, my second question is, given you said that it's normally your policy to have 2 members of staff minimum on site, if an occasion happened where one member was left on site late at night, how could they safely manage that store late at night on their own?
Yeah, well, I think as I've already addressed, and we've both already addressed, the policy is to have 2 members of staff. The concern about a condition, as potentially clumsily made by myself, is just about the strictness of the way the licensing regime operates, in the event that even if it's a short point in time, when you then only have one person on the store for whatever reason, if an alcohol sale was to take place, there'd be a technical breach of your licence, and that's just a concern about the condition. But the policy is for 2 people, and as explained by Dominic already, we wouldn't open in a situation whereby, if for some reason we were down to 1 member of staff, we'd have to source another member of staff to meet our minimum staffing requirements that the policies of the store requires. Sorry, Councillor, I'm conscious that I'm trying to address both yourself and yourselves at the same time.
Sorry, but my question wasn't that. It wasn't whether you could see practical issues with adhering to the minimum staffing level. It was, how could you safely manage the store late at night, when historically that has been when violent attacks and thefts from the store have occurred with one person? Because at the moment, without that condition, that situation could occur, and that is the concern of local residents.
We're not proposing to do that. We're not proposing to run the store with one person late at night. That's not what we're proposing to do. So the answer, there isn't an answer to the question in that sense, because we're literally not proposing to do that. And in terms of, historically, that's the time at which incidents occur. I think that is quite historic. There's not evidence of recent incidents occurring in store late at night that have been problematic. The more recent incidents of shoplifting, etc., have been, I think the most recent one that, not yourself, Councillor, but another representation referred to was a sort of middle of the afternoon incident. So we're not proposing to run with one member of staff in the evening.
Just another quick question. Going back to the recording of these sales, so you've got a mixture of AI and everything else that it flags up immediately, somebody has to come and okay it, off they go, da 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 da. Do you keep a record of refusals? And how do you manage a refusal? You say you don't take the name and address for a shoplifter, but if there was a refusal of a certain person and they came up and it was recorded, do you retain a picture of that person? Or, you know, sort of through people keep coming in and trying it, basically?
No, we don't record people's information, but what we have is we've got a very robust till system that won't let the cashier continue with a sale if they don't have suitable ID that's given to them. That is all then recorded onto the reports that has already been mentioned, which is a 4 weekly report. And then what we have is, if for any reason that the challenge rate isn't high enough from a certain individual, then there is what we call observations and interviews that take place to ensure that their training is up to date and correct. Yeah. And then part of my role is once every 8 weeks I have to go and check everybody's, what we call it, an AOS folder, which is an alcohol related sale folder, and I have to check the completion of that and the completion of the interviews.
Yeah, so just the recording of the refusal is therefore automatic. It's not somebody that has to manually fill in a book or anything like that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Sorry, if I can. On the incident logs, at the moment, my understanding is that if this is not a condition, you're not obliged to make these available to licensing officers on demand. There is obviously a huge amount of concern that incidents of criminality go unreported because they're considered minor, but they can be quite threatening in nature for someone to be in the store during the incident. Why do you object to the refusals register, the incident log and the training logs being conditional items? It doesn't seem a big ask to have those available to Mr. Leonard and his team if requested.
That we propose, which is what you've got in your document. So, for example, we see there will be an electronic point of sale system which automatically prompts a till operator to verify age of customer wherever alcohol is sold. There will be an electronic record of every alcohol sale, both authorised and refused, and will be kept on the electronic point of sale system. So we're not objecting to your condition. We're saying we've already dealt with it in the operating schedule, which is what gets made into the conditions that will form the licence. So we don't need anything extra putting on because we've preemptively dealt with these issues.
For Mr. Leonard just to confirm that does translate into an enforceable, effective condition on those 3 items, because if it did, then that would satisfy me on that one. But I'm not trained up to the level to know.
Perhaps I could answer. I was going to ask a question which brings in the whole security and all the issues, which I think were the thing. As I said, my issue, as Freddie has just come out with that, is that the objective, the primary licensing objectives on page 27, part O, they're the undertakings that have been put in the application, which I will determine and put into workable conditions. Obviously, I can't create the own ones I want. You know, they're the ones that are in there. I admit, I adapt so they are workable and manageable and proportionate. The one question I was going to ask on there, because I noticed when you summed up, you were saying that you've got a series of body-worn cameras that the staff can use. Therein might be the issue that's not mentioned on here. That might be a reassurance to security, I mean, like that, because again, I won't lie that 2 people is difficult sometimes because of natural emergencies, and bearing in mind that it's not a solely an off licence, it provides a whole load of other things. So much like they are at the moment, opening at 6:30, and not selling alcohol for an hour and a half, because their licence doesn't permit them to do that. Their till prompt stops them from doing that anyway. So we're in a situation much the same as if someone had to go out in emergency. Clearly, it wouldn't be what you'd want to do for security and safety. However, with the sets of security, much the same as the CCTV covering the outside, I'm sure the police and the council would love a whole host of cameras outside covering the whole parade. But in the real world, you've got to look at what you can do when you're taking video footage to the public outside. They have got an adequate number of cameras in there, and as long as they operate to the conditions in their operating schedule, the police didn't see fit to argue that and put their own set of conditions in relating to that. So I think that would cover it. Certainly the concern may be with the age of staff or the number of staff or the lack of staff or whatever, where there's that concern that maybe they'd be vulnerable. Possibly if there's body worn cameras and they've got them and they're prepared to use them, and it's not an additional expense to bring them in because they've said they've got them, is if the till staff had those as a condition, then you've got a situation where not only does it record any confrontation they have, but it also acts as a deterrent which may protect the staff for anyone that's being grieved. Now that is something, I'd say, part of the operating schedule. It's not on here, but they've offered that might reassure all other members that there is that additional security there, and maybe that would be a better condition to consider than maybe saying that you must have two people, which, as I said, could be capable of causing problems. Again, obviously they've got a risk assessment scheme that the management do, and they're responsible for that, and obviously we take them to task if they fall short of that, but not necessarily as a condition on a licence. And just to reassure you all with regards to that one condition that I think again was explained under the new licences, if you go to page 35 on the premises licence, when they say, you know, the licensable activities, it says retail sale of alcohol, but there's also the additional section underneath which says alcohol is supplied for consumption off the premises. So that makes it crystal clear that it's not open containers, anything. Any other venues like pubs or anything like that be on and off, or it'll be on only. This says quite clearly off premises. That takes away any issues you might have or worries or concerns regarding that condition they want removed.
In the licensing objectives, it talks about keeping records, but it doesn't in there substantially say that you have a right to examine and how long the record should be kept for. Is that something that you would naturally go away from this sub-licensing committee and apply, or would you have to have discussions with the applicant? How would it work, to make it an enforceable condition where it actually manifestly means something and the applicant knows how long they're meant to retain records for, and how does that work?
Well, in respect to that, Chair, as I said, obviously the conditions, we would take the undertakings that are in the application, adapt them to workable conditions. Any conditions that you may consider, which would then go on Annex 3 of a premises licence, that's ones that are set by the committee as a result of a hearing. So they're the conditions that go on there. I can't go away and just create another load, even by agreement. Obviously, we'd like to have a good working relationship with the co-op and indeed all our premises that are licensed. But obviously, we can't create something that's not there, that's not been here on thing. Certainly on the thing there's got to be asking whether there's any merit of saying we've got all the names and details of all people we've refused. Obviously, this is local staff serving local people, and I'm sure that over a period of time, a majority of those, you're not getting loads of strangers coming, it is serving the local community. So I'm guessing it's not the right word, but I suspect that the staff that have been there any period of time will know the ones they don't serve or the ones they don't want. Obviously, the till prompt system it's a recording system. Again, antiquated from days gone past where we did take names, well, not necessarily names, addresses. You can't necessarily demand someone, even the police can't demand someone to give their name under these current laws. So you're in a situation where they could just refuse it and take a description. But again, you've got to look at what's practical with regards to how much time they're doing the recording on that. If they've got CCTV that is working and is in sync with their tills, then theoretically, if it becomes a case where there's a crime to be investigated, then the police can then look at CCTV, or us indeed, look at the CCTV in sync with their till to see, so you'd have images of the people that are being refused, everything like that. So there's no power to demand names. So at the end of the day, as long as you're in a situation where that, the key to this is protecting vulnerable people or whatever, or upholding the licensing law, which is refusing a sale to someone that cannot provide evidence that they are able to buy it. So in that respect, I think the policy that's put in here, again, what I'd look at on that is if something was too out of hand or not acceptable, the police have got their own set of standard conditions which they would impose if they're not happy with an application. Again, they haven't chose to do that. So one would accept on this thing here, when you do it proportionately, if this is a premises was keep coming to notice, then quite clearly we would insist that we'd like something as strong as we could get. But obviously, as it stands at this stage here, if as a result of all these new measures coming in, it's still not good enough, that's when there's the point of review or engage consultation with the applicant and saying, well, you know, you might need to amend this or tidy this up a bit so that we can move forward. Hopefully that explains it. As I said, there's no power to demand it all, but as long as we've got a system in place which shows that they're acting responsibly to prevent sales that shouldn't go ahead, then I think all parties will be happy.
Thank you, Chair. Question for the applicants. I accept the fact that the store is very well covered internally by CCTV. Supposing that CCTV picks up someone shoplifting, say, a bottle of wine or a couple of cans of beer, how is that then logged, and how is the record kept of that?
So we have an internal system where the staff or the manager will report all thefts or any instance that happen in store. It's a system called ShopSafe, which has recently been launched by Central Cup since we've merged. So they then record details of the theft, where they can also put a description of the offender or the person that's caused the trouble on there, and that is linked then through all of the other stores, and it's linked with the police as well, so it reports to both.
Sorry, just how long are those records kept for?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I would imagine indefinitely, because it's like a crime database. So what it does help us with. So say, for example, you had an offender that was offended in one store and also in another store. It helps you link those together, which then helps build a bigger case for the police.
Thank you, Chair. As always, the only thing I ask is any conditions that you may consider appropriate are manageable and that I can actually enforce should that need to be the case. I think everyone's covered the areas on this thing, and I think the concerns were really about the staff in the management and to ensure there's no irresponsible sales or pilfering. And again, in another location on the borough in Enguston, we had a similar location with a venue with the post office where they couldn't manage all the activities going on there, and some crimes were not reported. So again, the system in place with CCTV, body cams, all the things there, if complaints are received by the police or the licensing authority to say, you know, that it's not got working in hand there, if we've got measures in place that we can actually then follow up investigation, it will make things far easier. And obviously we would take a dim view if we find that crimes are not being reported, and therefore that's why it's going under the radar, and possibly the concerns that local residents have got late in the evening is because stuff is not being reported. Again, these systems in place ensure that should these allegations be made, we've got a system in place that we can go back and follow up, checking on until register receipts or CCTV. These are things we can follow up on that if a genuine allegation comes in afterwards. So as long as the conditions are applicable, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Yeah, I just reiterate my main concerns. My main concerns are about retention period of records and accessibility to the licensing team to satisfy themselves that what's been promised is adhered to. And my other second main point is the minimum staffing levels, particularly late at night when the premises are to be locked up, when the premises are the most vulnerable to serious attack. Obviously, it's hard to write a rule. I don't want to tie anyone up in knots, and I don't want to put any unnecessary constraints on the business. But we have to be satisfied that someone doesn't leave half an hour before the shop closes and a serious incident happens in the last 30 minutes, which could leave that member of staff at risk and other customers potentially. So I would ask you to look at what's practical on the minimum staffing level based on the feedback from Mr. Leonard about body cameras. Thank you.
Yes, councillors. First of all, grateful for the time and your questions this afternoon. Councillors, the licensing regime is a permissive one, and what the statute and what case law tells us repeatedly is that when you consider an application like this, you have to take steps that are proportionate to the promotion of the licensing objectives. It's not a case of creating the perfect license which fixes everything. And actually what is quite clear as well, there is a need for flexibility, because otherwise, if situations arise that we need to respond to and update our management practices, if we're caught in an overly restrictive license, we can't actually do that, and we need to come back. And so what we're asking you to consider today is the co-op as an operator, who are the named individuals who are applying for this license, are they an appropriate and trustworthy operator to operate this license? And there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that they're not, that they're incapable of running the license that they've applied for in this area, because in reality, that is exactly what they're doing at the moment. And the purpose of this application is to modernise that license. There is no evidence of an ongoing issue at this point in time that needs to be addressed. If there were, there would have been complaints to you, there would have been representations from the police, this licence would have been considered sooner. It's not been. We're only here today because we have made an application to bring this licence into a modern format to make it easier for everybody to regulate the situation. And so we don't propose to add any additional conditions in light of the discussion that have come out today, because we're content that the operating procedure that we've put forward is already sufficiently robust to achieve everything that it needs to. I think we've been very clear about who we are, how we've ended up here, the extent of the policies, the training, the procedures we have in place to ensure that this is a properly run premises. And there's no reason to go behind that. There's no evidence to dispute any of that. And the measures we've proposed in the operating schedule are entirely appropriate. And we don't consider it necessary to add anything beyond that, because that is sufficient. And so, councillors, just to reiterate once again that when you're making a decision like this, you need to have particular regard to any representations that are made by responsible authorities, because they're the experts in their relevant areas. We don't have any representations from the police, we don't have any representations from the environmental health or anybody like that, because everybody is content that this schedule that we've put forward is an appropriate one to manage this situation. And so we'd ask you to approve the application in the format that it's been made.
Right, I will now ask Ms Sultan to read the committee's decision. Ms Sultan.
Thank you, Chair. The subcommittee has reached a decision, and in reaching its decision, the subcommittee carefully considered the application, the licensing officer's report, the written and oral representation made by the applicant's representative, by ward councillor, together with the council's statement of licensing policy, the Secretary of State guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act, and the 4 licensing objectives. Having carefully balanced the competing interests, the subcommittee is satisfied that the granting of the variation of the premises licence as applied for. For written decision, notice will be sent out in 5 working days, and if there is anyone who's aggrieved by the decision, they can, of course, appeal to the Magistrates Court within 21 days, and the notice will have details of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That concludes our business for the day. May I thank everybody for attending. Thank you for your detailed summaries and things. Keep going with your IT. I hope it doesn't break down. You don't have a power cut. Anyway, thank you for everybody for attending, and good afternoon to you all. Thank you. Chair?